The damp London air clung to me like a second skin as I crunched across the overgrown path. The Saturn AV glitched, spitting out a location that looked more like a scene from a horror movie than the abandoned Facebook summer camp reunion our group had meticulously planned. We were 5, Maya, the effortlessly cool one who'd organized it all, Ben, the class clown forever vying for her attention, Sarah, the brooding artist with a dark secret, Liam, the brooding artist's brooding ex, and me, Alex, the perpetual documentarian, phone perpetually poised to capture every cringe-worthy moment. The camp itself was a ramshackle collection of cabins, their peeling paint and boarded windows leering out from the encroaching woods. An unsettling silence hung heavy, broken only by the mournful hoot of an owl. Then I saw it, a single, crimson footprint, stark against the dusty porch of the central cabin. My breath hitched. Maya, ever the pragmatist, scoffed. "Probably a raccoon," she said, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. Unease settled in our bellies as thick as the fog rolling in from the nearby lake. We pried open the creaking cabin door, revealing a dusty interior frozen in time. Facebook memorabilia, faded posters, beanbags emblazoned with the thumbs-up logo, seemed to mock us with their cheerfulness. A sense of wrongness prickled my skin. The weekend was a tinderbox of old rivalries reignited. Maya and Sarah locked horns over a past betrayal, their venomous exchanges laced with suppressed fury. Liam, perpetually sulky, seemed to relish the tension. Ben, ever the mediator, tried to lighten the mood with clumsy jokes that fell flat. The footprint remained a constant, unsettling reminder of the unseen danger lurking in the woods. Then came the screams. Sarah, the first to vanish, was found later that night by the lake, her body a grotesque parody of Michelangelo's David, limbs twisted at unnatural angles. Panic seized us. Accusations flew. Maya blamed Sarah's dark past catching up with her. Ben, his bravado crumbling, suspected Liam, fueled by their simmering jealousy. Liam, in turn, pointed the finger at Maya, her ambition a dangerous double-edged sword. The following day, we found Ben hanging from the rafters of the mess hall, a cruel Facebook-like symbol carved into his chest. Fear solidified into a cold dread. We were being hunted. Maya, ever resourceful, barricaded ourselves in the central cabin. The night was a symphony of creaks and groans, punctuated by the distant thud of something heavy approaching. Dawn brought a horrifying discovery. Liam was gone. In his place, a single, taunting post on the dusty camp computer screen, "You haven't seen anything yet." The unlike. Terror choked the air. Maya, her facade shattered, confessed a dark secret. The camp had been shut down after a fatal prank gone wrong, a prank she'd masterminded. Sarah, the victim, had sworn revenge. But as relief washed over us, a glint of metal caught my eye. A hidden compartment in the computer desk revealed a security camera feed. On the grainy screen, a figure emerged from the woods, a familiar silhouette in a faded hoodie, the camp janitor, a man we'd barely spoken to throughout the weekend. He watched us with a chilling smile, a pair of rusty pruning shears glinting in his hand. The unlike wasn't about revenge. It was about reminding us that sometimes, the most terrifying monsters were the most ordinary faces. The realization slammed into me like a physical blow. The janitor. The man who'd shuffled around with that perpetual vacant look, replacing light bulbs and refilling the rusty hand sanitizer dispensers, was the architect of our nightmare. Terror choked the scream that lodged itself in my throat. Maya, pale as a ghost, stared at the screen, her carefully constructed facade crumbling like the decaying paint on the cabin walls. We were trapped, a cornered animal with a sadistic hunter circling. We didn't have a weapon, let alone a plan. A blood-curdling shriek tore through the silence, ripping through the fragile threads of hope that still clung to us. It was Maya. Driven by a primal urge, I bolted towards the mess hall, my legs churning through the undergrowth. The scene that greeted me was carved straight from a depraved artist's nightmare. Maya's body lay sprawled on the floor, an obscene mockery of the thumbs-up logo carved into her forehead with chilling precision. Bile rose in my throat. Liam stumbled out from behind the overturned mess hall tables, his face a mask of horror. In his trembling hand, he clutched a shard of broken glass. He got Sarah, he stammered, his voice bordering on a whimper. He took her to the amphitheater. A concrete structure built into the hillside, its stage overlooking the glassy surface of the lake. We have to help her, I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. But even as I spoke, a cold, logical part of me knew it was a lost cause. The janitor, whoever he was, had planned this with meticulous detail. We sprinted towards the amphitheater, Liam a stumbling shadow at my side. The silence that greeted us was heavier than the damp air. Then, a sickening crunch echoed through the deserted structure. Our footsteps faltered. We cautiously rounded a corner, our worst fears confirmed. Sarah was suspended mid-air, her body contorted in a horrifying tableau, strung up with rusted chains like a grotesque marionette. The rusty shears lay at the janitor's feet, his face twisted in a maniacal grin. He wore a twisted Facebook mask, the cheerful thumbs-up logo transformed into a cruel smile dripping with a crimson liquid that could only be blood. He turned, his gaze locking onto ours. He wasn't just the janitor, he was the camp counselor, the one responsible for the prank that had gone fatally wrong. In his deranged mind, this was his twisted form of justice, a gruesome social media purge fueled by years of festering resentment. You all ruined everything, he rasped, his voice a rusty hinge twisting in the damp air. Now, you get to like this. He lunged for Liam, the shears glinting in the weak sunlight filtering through the cracked windows. I reacted instinctively, shoving Liam aside as the shears hissed through the air. The searing pain in my shoulder exploded like a supernova, momentarily driving the world around me white. A primal scream ripped from my throat as the janitor twisted the shears, aiming for the killing blow. But before it could connect, a deafening crack filled the air. Liam, fueled by a desperate rage, had brought down a heavy concrete block from a crumbling section of the amphitheater, slamming it squarely into the janitor's back. The impact sent both of them crashing to the ground. The janitor lay still, a single crimson stain blooming on his faded hoodie. Relief washed over me, tinged with a metallic tang of blood. I stumbled towards Liam, adrenaline masking the throbbing pain in my shoulder. But the horror wasn't over. As we reached the janitor's body, a low, guttural moan escaped his lips. He wasn't dead, just barely. With a final surge of strength, he lunged for Liam, his hand grasping at the shard of glass in Liam's hand. A desperate struggle ensued, a grotesque ballet of fear and fury. The clinking of glass on concrete filled the air as they grappled on the blood-soaked floor. Finally, with a sickening crunch, Liam's hand came down, the shard of glass piercing the janitor's throat. A death rattle escaped the killer's lips, his eyes widening in disbelief before glazing over. Silence descended once more, broken only by our ragged breaths and the rhythmic lap of the lake against the shore. We stood there, bathed in the blood-soaked twilight, survivors of a nightmare fueled by social media malice. Escape would come, eventually. But the brutal scars, both physical and emotional, would forever be etched onto our memories, a constant reminder of the day we liked death and received a notification we could never unsee. The acrid tang of blood hung heavy in the air, a metallic counterpoint to the chirping crickets that had re-emerged with the dying light. Relief, a fleeting mirage, shimmered and dissolved as I looked down at my shoulder. The janitor's shears had carved a deep gash, blood pulsing from the wound like a deranged Facebook notification. Liam, as pale as the concrete surrounding us, stared at his trembling hand, the shard of glass still clutched tightly. He let out a choked sob, the sound raw and primal. The monstrous Facebook mask, a grotesque parody of happiness, lay discarded at our feet, a silent testament to the horror we'd just endured. We have to get out of here," I croaked, my voice rasping. Every movement sent a fresh jolt of pain radiating through my shoulder. We stumbled out of the amphitheater, the silence oppressive, broken only by the sickening squelch of our shoes on the blood-soaked ground. The dying light cast long, grotesque shadows, turning the once familiar woods into a labyrinth of lurking horrors. Just as a sliver of hope flickered in the distance, a dim glow emanating from the direction of the central cabin, a guttural moan echoed from behind us. My blood ran cold. The janitor. No way. He had to be dead. Liam whirled around, his eyes wide with terror. The shard of glass, slick with blood, dangled uselessly in his hand. A hulking figure emerged from the encroaching darkness. The janitor, his face a grotesque mask of pain and fury, lurched towards us, a single, horrifying word escaping his mangled lips. Unlike. He wasn't the same man we'd overpowered moments ago. Adrenaline, a twisted cocktail of rage and survival instinct, fueled his movements. He lunged for Liam, his hand grasping for the shard of glass, a single, desperate attempt at a final, brutal like. I reacted without thinking, fueled by a primal urge to survive. With a scream that tore through the twilight, I shoved Liam aside. The impact sent us both sprawling, my shoulder screaming its protest. But it bought Liam precious seconds. He scrambled to his feet, a desperate glint in his eyes. Grabbing a loose concrete block from the wreckage of the amphitheater, he brought it down with a sickening crunch on the janitor's head. This time, there was no moan, no guttural gasp. The janitor crumpled to the ground, a lifeless marionette cut from its strings. We stood there, panting, bathed in the dying light. The world seemed to hold its breath, the silence heavy with the weight of what we'd done. Relief, however, remained elusive. As I looked closer, a fresh wave of horror washed over me. The janitor's hand, the one that had reached for Liam's throat, wasn't empty. It clutched a single, rusted key. The key to the central cabin. The one place we hadn't dared to explore. The cabin that held the secrets of this forsaken camp, secrets that might just cost us our lives. With a shaky hand, I reached for the key. The metallic chill sent a shiver down my spine. "We have to know," Liam whispered, his voice barely a rasp. "We have to know why." And so, with the weight of the nightmare hanging heavy on our shoulders, we stumbled towards the central cabin, the key a chilling reminder that the horror might not be over. The darkness within promised more secrets, more violence, and perhaps, a horrifying truth about the unlike that had claimed our friends' lives. The rusted key groaned in protest as I forced it into the ancient lock of the central cabin. The groan echoed through the decaying wood like a skeletal laugh. With a final heave, the door creaked open, revealing a scene both macabre and chilling. Cobwebs, thick as fishermen's nets, hung from the rafters, obscuring much of the interior. Dust motes danced in a sliver of moonlight filtering through a boarded-up window. In the center of the room, a makeshift altar had been constructed. A circle of blackened stones surrounded a wooden chest, its ornately carved surface marred by deep gouges. My stomach lurched. This wasn't a prank gone wrong. This was something far more sinister, a ritualistic offering conducted by a madman fueled by a twisted social media ideology. Just then, a low growl ripped through the silence. It wasn't the guttural moan of the janitor, but a deeper, more primal sound that sent shivers down my spine. Liam, his face a mask of terror, pointed towards a dark corner behind the altar. Two glowing red orbs blinked into existence, reflecting off something metallic. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was him, the janitor, or whatever remained of him, but this wasn't the same creature we'd faced moments ago. He moved with an unnatural fluidity, his eyes burning with a feral hunger. In his hand, he clutched a rusty meat cleaver, its blade glinting with a sickening sheen in the dim light. Unlike, he roared, the word a guttural death knell. Adrenaline flooded my system. We didn't have time for questions or explanations. We had to fight, or become another grotesque offering on his twisted social media altar. Liam grabbed a heavy metal pipe he'd found near the door, his knuckles white with the strain. I scanned the room, desperate for a weapon. My eyes landed on a rusted fire extinguisher mounted on the wall. It wouldn't be ideal, but it was all I had. Liam, his face a mask of terror, pointed towards a dark corner behind the altar. Two glowing red orbs blinked into existence, reflecting off something metallic. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was him, the janitor, or whatever remained of him, but this wasn't the same creature we'd faced moments ago. He moved with an unnatural fluidity, his eyes burning with a feral hunger. In his hand, he clutched a rusty meat cleaver, its blade glinting with a sickening sheen in the dim light. Unlike, he roared, the word a guttural death knell. Adrenaline flooded my system. We didn't have time for questions or explanations. We had to fight, or become another grotesque offering on his twisted social media altar. Liam grabbed a heavy metal pipe he'd found near the door, his knuckles white with the strain. I scanned the room, desperate for a weapon. My eyes landed on a rusted fire extinguisher mounted on the wall. It wouldn't be ideal, but it was all I had. I reacted instinctively. Hurling the empty fire extinguisher, I caught the janitor square in the chest. It knocked him off balance, sending him crashing through the rickety wooden altar. The impact dislodged the ornately carved chest. It toppled over with a loud thump, spilling its contents onto the dusty floor. A collective gasp escaped our lips. Inside the chest lay a collection of phones, their screens flickering with a single, chilling message, "You've been unliked." But amongst the phones, nestled in a bed of crimson velvet, lay a single, physical Facebook dislike symbol. It was crafted from bone, crudely carved and stained a sickening shade of red. Just then, a deafening crack filled the room. The ceiling, weakened by decades of neglect, gave way. A torrent of debris rained down, burying the janitor under a mountain of wood and dust. Silence descended once more, broken only by our ragged gasps. We stood there, shell-shocked, surrounded by the remnants of the nightmare, the chest full of phones, the bone, dislike, symbol. It all pointed to a horrifying truth. The camp counselor, twisted by the sting of online rejection, had created his own twisted social media purge, but as relief washed over me, a cold dread settled in its wake. Was the janitor truly dead? Or was he simply waiting, biding his time, until his next, unlike, notification arrived? We stumbled out of the cabin into the pre-dawn light, the rising sun casting long shadows across the deserted camp. We were alive. But the scars, both physical and emotional, would forever be etched onto our memories. And the chilling question lingered, in a world obsessed with online validation, how many more unlikes were waiting to be delivered? The silence outside the cabin felt deafening after the cacophony of the collapsing ceiling and the janitor's unearthly roars. Dawn's weak light barely penetrated the thick canopy of trees, casting an unsettling greenish hue over the camp. We were battered, bruised, and utterly depleted. The fight had ripped my shoulder further, and Liam cradled the pipe like a talisman, his haunted eyes reflecting the horrors we'd just witnessed. Suddenly, a shrill ring shattered the stillness. My phone, miraculously still functional, displayed an unknown number. My breath hitched. Could it be? Don't answer it, Liam rasped, his voice barely a whisper, but the morbid curiosity gnawed at me. With trembling fingers, I answered the call. A distorted voice crackled through the speaker, a voice I recognized all too well. "Did you like your unlike notification?" the voice rasped, a sickening glee lacing the words. My blood ran cold. It couldn't be. We'd buried him. A blood-curdling scream pierced the phone. It wasn't the janitor's. It was Maya's voice, filled with raw terror. Then, a sickening crunch. The call ended abruptly. "Maya," I breathed, a primal scream rising in my throat. The image of Maya's lifeless body contorted into a grotesque thumbs-down flashed before my eyes. Despair threatened to engulf me. Liam, however, seemed galvanized by the phone call. "He's alive. And he has Maya." His voice, though strained, held a steely resolve. We couldn't call the police. This camp was off the grid, and even if we reached them, help wouldn't arrive in time. We had to find Maya, and fast. Driven by a desperate hope, we charged deeper into the woods. The damp undergrowth clawed at our clothes, and the air hung heavy with the stench of decay. We followed a barely there trail, the memory of Maya's frantic pleas urging us forward. The trail led us to a clearing where the remnants of a bonfire smoldered. In the center, propped against a tree, was Maya. Her body was a canvas of raw violence, each, unlike, carved into her flesh with a grotesque precision. Her vacant eyes stared accusingly at the rising sun. Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring the scene before me. But grief quickly morphed into a cold, steely rage. We wouldn't become another victim in the janitor's twisted social media purge. A twig snapped behind us. We whipped around, Liam raising the pipe like a club. Emerging from the shadows was the janitor, a horrifying parody of a human being. His lower leg was mangled, twisted at an unnatural angle. But his eyes, burning with a fanatical zeal, held the chilling promise of more brutality. He clutched the bone dislike symbol in his hand, a sickening totem of his twisted ideology. With a guttural roar, he charged. We fought like cornered animals. Liam swung the pipe with bone-jarring force, connecting with the janitor's shoulder. The crack was audible even above the ringing in my ears. The janitor howled in pain, momentarily staggering back. Seizing my opportunity, I lunged forward, the fire extinguisher dangling uselessly in my hand. I aimed for his head, hoping to disorient him. The metal canister connected with a sickening thud, splitting open on impact. A cloud of white powder erupted, momentarily blinding both of us. Through the haze, I stumbled blindly, adrenaline the only thing propelling me forward. My hand grasped something cold and hard. It was the cleaver, the one the janitor had dropped in the struggle. My grip tightened on the weapon, a primal urge to survive taking over. When the dust settled, the janitor was gone. Relief washed over me, fleeting and fragile. But then, a blood-curdling scream ripped through the clearing. It was Liam. He was sprawled on the ground, pinned beneath the janitor, the bone dislike symbol hovering inches from his throat. The janitor's face, contorted in a maniacal grin, was a mask of twisted satisfaction. He raised the bone symbol high, ready to deliver the final, brutal, unlike. In that split second, everything blurred. Time slowed down. I wasn't thinking, I was reacting. With a primal scream, I lunged forward, plunging the cleaver deep into the janitor's back. The impact sent a jolt of pain through my arm, but the janitor's scream was abruptly cut short. He gurgled, a look of disbelief etched on his face before collapsing onto Liam, his lifeless weight pinning both of them to the ground. Silence descended, heavy and oppressive. I slunk to my knees, the cleaver clattering to the blood-soaked earth. Bile rose in my throat, the metallic tang acrid on my tongue. My vision swam, the world tilting on its axis. Liam, thankfully, was alive, gasping for breath under the weight of the dead janitor. With a surge of adrenaline, I scrambled to free him. The janitor's body was heavy, rigor mortis setting in fast. Liam coughed and sputtered, his eyes wide with terror as he saw the cleaver and the scene around him. "We have to get out of here," I croaked, my voice hoarse. My head throbbed, and my injured shoulder screamed in protest. But the thought of staying another minute in this unholy place spurred me on. We stumbled back towards the camp, the weight of the nightmare hanging heavy on our shoulders. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves sent tremors of fear down my spine. We didn't speak, the silence a chilling testament to the horrors we'd endured. Reaching the central cabin, we discovered the phones from the chest were gone. A sick feeling gnawed at my gut. Were they trophies for the janitor, or something more? Panic clawed at me. What if this wasn't over? What if the phones were his way of broadcasting his twisted social media purge to the world? Or worse, what if they were a way to lure more victims to this forsaken camp? We had to get out, raise the alarm. But first, we needed a car. Maya's car, thankfully, was still parked at the ramshackle entrance. It was a beat-up old thing, but it was our only hope. The drive to civilization was a blur. Every passing mile felt like an eternity. The image of Maya, carved into a grotesque mockery, flashed in my mind, a constant reminder of the brutality we'd witnessed. Reaching the nearest town, a small, sleepy hamlet nestled amidst rolling hills, was a surreal experience. The sight of normal life, people going about their day, oblivious to the horrors we'd just escaped, filled me with a strange sense of detachment. We stumbled into a diner, the aroma of coffee and bacon a stark contrast to the stench of blood and decay that clung to us. The friendly waitress, a woman with kind eyes and a warm smile, seemed genuinely concerned about our disheveled state, but how much could we tell her? Could we explain the Facebook-obsessed killer, the brutal, unlike notifications carved into flesh? We settled for a vague story about a car accident, the lie clinging to our throats like ashes. The police arrived eventually, drawn by our anxious demeanor. The interrogation was grueling. We recounted the accident, omitting the horrifying details. Their skepticism was palpable, their eyes lingering on the blood-stained clothes we still wore. Finally, they let us go. Exhausted and emotionally drained, we collapsed into a cheap motel room. The nightmares started that night, vivid and horrifying replays of the camp. The janitor's maniacal grin, Maya's scream, the bone dislike symbol, they haunted my sleep, leaving me drenched in cold sweat. Days turned into weeks, then months. The police investigation into the accident went nowhere. Maya's death was ruled a tragic accident, Liam and I dismissed as hysterical witnesses. The phones from the chest were never found, the scars, both physical and mental, remained. We never spoke about the camp again, the shared trauma forming an unspoken bond between us. Yet, a chilling fear lingered in the back of my mind. Then, one day, a notification popped up on my phone. It wasn't Facebook, but a text message from an unknown number. A single image, a grainy photo of a deserted camp, its cabins half buried by foliage. Beneath it, a single, chilling word, liked. My blood ran cold. The Facebook camp. It couldn't be. We'd burned it down, or so we thought. Panic seized me. Was the janitor truly gone? Or had he found a way to survive? And was this just the beginning of his twisted social media reign of terror? The unanswered question hung like a dark cloud, a chilling reminder that the nightmare might not be over. As I stared at the text, a single, terrifying thought echoed in my mind. In a world obsessed with online validation, how many more unlikes were waiting to be delivered? The text message burned into my retinas, a digital branding iron searing the image of the camp and the single, ominous word, liked. Sleep became a stranger, replaced by a constant vigil against the phone's insistent buzz. Liam, his haunted eyes mirroring my own terror, became a ghost of his former self. We clung to a fragile normalcy, but the specter of the camp loomed large. One rainy night, another text arrived. This time, a video. It was short, shaky, and filmed at night. The flickering light revealed the camp, not burned down as we'd hoped, but eerily untouched. A bonfire crackled in the clearing, casting grotesque shadows that danced across the dilapidated cabins. Then, a figure emerged from the woods. It was the janitor, or what remained of him. His mangled leg was crudely bandaged, and his face, a roadmap of infected wounds, was twisted in a maniacal grin. In his hand, he held a phone, one of the missing phones from the chest. He spoke, his voice a raspy whisper distorted by the video's poor quality. "You didn't. Unlike me," he rasped, the words punctuated by coughs that sent shivers down my spine. He raised the phone to the camera, displaying the screen. It showed a single, brutal notification: "You've been unfriended." The video ended abruptly. We stared at the blank screen, the silence broken only by the drumming rain against the window. "He's alive," Liam said, his voice a hollow whisper. "And he's coming for us." The knowledge ignited a cold fury within me. We wouldn't be victims again. This time, we'd hunt him. Armed with the knowledge of the camp's location gleaned from the text, we embarked on a descent back into our personal hell. The journey was fraught with tension. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sent our hands scrambling for the makeshift weapons we'd fashioned, Liam with a crowbar, me with a hunting knife I'd bought in a fit of paranoia. The camp greeted us with an unsettling stillness. The bonfire was long extinguished, replaced by an oppressive silence. We approached cautiously, every nerve on edge. Then, a blood-curdling scream shattered the quiet. It came from the central cabin. We sprinted towards the sound, fear of fist tightening around my chest. The door to the cabin hung open, a gruesome tableau presented within. Maya's body, or what remained of it, was propped up on a makeshift throne of broken furniture. Her flesh was a canvas of grotesque, unfriend notifications, carved with surgical precision. In her vacant eyes, a single phone was jammed, the screen displaying a taunting message: "Rejected." Grief threatened to engulf me, but rage held it at bay. We were too late for Maya, but there was still a chance for ourselves. A blood-curdling growl echoed from behind us. The janitor stood in the doorway, his mangled leg replaced with a makeshift wooden crutch. He held the bone dislike symbol, its crimson stain now a sickening black. "You thought you could unfriend me," he rasped, his voice a guttural parody of human speech. He lunged. We scattered, desperation fueling our movements. The ensuing fight was a brutal ballet of fear and fury. Liam swung the crowbar with a desperate strength, connecting with the janitor's shoulder with a sickening crunch. The janitor roared in pain, but didn't falter. He swung the bone symbol at me, the tip slicing a deep gash across my arm. Pain exploded, but adrenaline muted it. I lunged back, plunging the hunting knife into his leg, the makeshift bandage offering little resistance. He screamed again, a sound laced with a strange, almost ecstatic pleasure. We grappled in the dusty confines of the cabin, furniture crashing around us. In the struggle, I knocked over a lantern, flames erupting and catching the dry wood alight. The cabin filled with the crackle of fire and the stench of burning wood. Seeing the flames, the janitor's face contorted in a chilling mix of fear and twisted satisfaction. "Let it all burn," he croaked. "Just like they unfriended me." He lunged for Liam, but I shoved him back. He stumbled, falling backwards into the flames. His screams were drowned out by the roar of the fire. We scrambled for the exit, the burning wood raining down behind us. We burst out of the cabin, collapsing onto the damp earth. The flames danced behind us, casting an eerie orange glow on the night sky. As we watched, the cabin became an inferno, consuming the janitor and his twisted ideology in a pyre of righteous fury. We lay there, gasping for breath, surrounded by the symphony of crackling flames and the mournful wail of distant sirens. Relief washed over me, a tidal wave threatening to pull me under. We were alive. But the victory tasted like ash. Just as exhaustion threatened to claim me, a guttural moan pierced the night. My eyes snapped open, dread chilling me to the bone. He lunged for Liam, but I shoved him back. He stumbled, falling backwards into the flames. His screams were drowned out by the roar of the fire. We scrambled for the exit, the burning wood raining down behind us. We burst out of the cabin, collapsing onto the damp earth. The flames danced behind us, casting an eerie orange glow on the night sky. As we watched, the cabin became an inferno, consuming the janitor and his twisted ideology in a pyre of righteous fury. We lay there, gasping for breath, surrounded by the symphony of crackling flames and the mournful wail of distant sirens. Relief washed over me, a tidal wave threatening to pull me under. We were alive. But the victory tasted like ash. Just as exhaustion threatened to claim me, a guttural moan pierced the night. My eyes snapped open, dread chilling me to the bone. Suddenly, Liam tripped, sprawling onto the damp earth. His ankle twisted at an unnatural angle, a scream escaping his lips. Despair threatened to consume me. I couldn't leave him. But every fiber of my being screamed at me to keep running. As I hesitated, the janitor emerged from the shadows, his blackened form a grotesque silhouette against the fire's glow. He raised the bone, dislike symbol, its warped shape glinting menacingly in the flickering light. Unfriended, he rasped, his voice a charred whisper. Just then, a memory surged through me, the fire extinguisher. I remembered discarding it during the fight in the cabin. Hope, a fragile ember, flickered to life within me. Spinning on my heel, I raced back towards the burning cabin. The heat radiated from the inferno, scorching my exposed skin. Ignoring the searing pain, I located the discarded extinguisher, a mangled mess but still containing a sliver of hope. I sprinted back towards Liam, the janitor's moans echoing ever closer. Reaching him, I knelt beside his writhing form. "Get back," he gasped, his eyes filled with fear and a strange understanding. I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. We'd come this far together. There was no abandoning him now. As the janitor closed in, a horrifying parody of a human being fueled by a twisted desire for social media vengeance, I aimed the fire extinguisher at him. A single, desperate prayer escaped my lips. Then, I pulled the trigger. The air blasted out of the fire extinguisher in a geyser of white powder. It momentarily blinded the janitor, his enraged roar cut short by a strangled cough. But the effect was temporary. His blackened hand, gnarled and twisted from the fire, lashed out, sending the extinguisher clattering across the forest floor. "Unlike," he roared, the word a death knell echoing amidst the crackling flames. He lumbered towards Liam, the bone, dislike, symbol raised high like a twisted scepter. Despair clawed at me. My hands were empty, my body racked with exhaustion and the throbbing pain in my shoulder. But as the janitor loomed over Liam, a primal scream ripped from my throat. It wasn't a scream of fear, but a primal roar of defiance, a challenge to this twisted embodiment of online cruelty. I lunged at the janitor, a desperate gambit fueled by a surge of adrenaline. My shoulder screamed in protest, but I ignored it, my entire body focused on a single goal, to stop him before it was too late. The impact sent both of us sprawling onto the damp earth. The stench of burning flesh and hair filled my nostrils as I grappled with the deranged man. He was surprisingly strong, fueled by a manic fervor. His blackened fingers reached for my throat, his touch searing like hot coals. Just as his grip tightened, a sickening crack echoed through the night. Liam, his face contorted in pain, had managed to use the discarded crowbar to smash the janitor's remaining kneecap. The sound was horrific, a wet crunch that reverberated through the clearing. The janitor screamed, a sound unlike anything I'd ever heard, a primal howl of agony and rage. His grip faltered momentarily, and I seized the opportunity. With a surge of strength, I grabbed his mangled arm, the one holding the bone dislike symbol. Using all my weight, I twisted it upwards, a sickening snap echoing in the night air. The janitor's scream became a blood-curdling shriek, his face contorting in unimaginable pain. He released his grip on my throat, clawing at his arm as it hung limply at his side. His blackened fingers reached for my throat, his touch searing like hot coals. Just as his grip tightened, a sickening crack echoed through the night. Liam, his face contorted in pain, had managed to use the discarded crowbar to smash the janitor's remaining kneecap. The sound was horrific, a wet crunch that reverberated through the clearing. The janitor screamed, a sound unlike anything I'd ever heard, a primal howl of agony and rage. His grip faltered momentarily, and I seized the opportunity. With a surge of strength, I grabbed his mangled arm, the one holding the bone dislike symbol. Using all my weight, I twisted it upwards, a sickening snap echoing in the night air. The janitor's scream became a blood-curdling shriek, his face contorting in unimaginable pain. He released his grip on my throat, clawing at his arm as it hung limply at his side. Blood spurted from the mangled joint, painting the forest floor a grotesque crimson. But the janitor continued to fight, a feral beast driven by an insane desire for vengeance. He lunged at me again, his remaining hand reaching for my eyes. Desperation fueled my next move. I grabbed the hunting knife that had fallen from my pocket during the struggle and plunged it into his good shoulder. He roared again, a sound that seemed to shake the very trees. He shoved me off him, sending me tumbling backwards. I landed hard on my already injured shoulder, a white-hot pain exploding through me. Just as the janitor turned back to Liam, a sound ripped through the air that sent shivers down my spine. The wailing sirens, so distant before, were now a deafening crescendo. The sound seemed to distract the janitor momentarily. He looked towards the flickering glow of the burning cabin, his burned face twisting in a mask of fury and defeat. With a final, earth-shuddering roar, he turned and stumbled back towards the inferno. Unfriended, he rasped the word of final, grotesque plea before he disappeared into the flames. We lay there, gasping for breath, the fire crackling a macabre lullaby. The sirens wailed closer, a promise of help that seemed to come too late. Liam, his face pale with pain, looked at me. "We did it," he whispered, his voice hoarse. I nodded, tears blurring my vision. But the victory felt hollow. We were alive, but the scars, both physical and emotional, would forever be etched onto our souls. The distant lights of approaching vehicles cast long shadows through the trees. As the first firefighters emerged from the woods, their faces etched with concern, I couldn't help but wonder, was this truly the end of the nightmare? Or had the unlike notification simply been postponed, waiting for the next time someone dared to defy the twisted logic of a social media-obsessed world? Relief, a fragile butterfly, fluttered tentatively in my stomach as the firefighters secured the scene. The acrid smoke stung my lungs, but it was a welcome change from the stench of burning flesh that had clung to the air moments before. Liam, his ankle throbbing, was loaded into an ambulance. As they wheeled him away, his eyes met mine, a shared understanding passing between us. This wasn't over. The police, their faces grim under the flashing red and blue lights, peppered us with questions. Our story, a deranged camp counselor, a twisted social media purge, must have sounded like the ravings of madmen, but amongst the charred remains of the central cabin, they found evidence. The phones, blackened by fire, still displayed their chilling notifications. The chest, warped by the heat, revealed a single, untouched phone. On its screen, a new notification pulsed with an ominous red glow. "You've been blocked." The officer holding the phone looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity. "Blocked by who?" he rasped, the answer hung heavy in the air, as thick and oppressive as the smoke. As days bled into weeks, the nightmares returned, a relentless assault on my sanity. The janitor's charred visage, the screams of the victims, the bone, dislike, symbol, they haunted my sleep, leaving me bathed in cold sweat. The police investigation hit a dead end. The phones were declared unidentified technology, the notifications a bizarre prank. The camp was deemed unsafe and condemned to demolition. Liam and I, bound by a shared trauma too horrific to articulate, tried to move on. We checked in on each other, hollow echoes of the friends we used to be. One day, a notification popped up on my phone. Not Facebook, but a text message from an unknown number, an image, a single, crudely carved bone, dislike, symbol, lying amongst the smoldering ruins of the demolished camp. Below it, a chilling caption, appeal denied. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum solo of terror. The janitor. He was alive. Or something was, and this time, he wasn't just targeting people with low social media scores. This time, it was personal. Panic clawed at my throat. I dialed Liam's number, my hand trembling. It went straight to voicemail. Panic clawed at my throat. I dialed Liam's number, my hand trembling. It went straight to voicemail. Liam, I rasped into the receiver, my voice laced with a primal fear. We have to go back. There was no answer, only the chilling silence that hung heavy in the air, a chilling premonition of the brutal and violent fight for survival that awaited us. The fight against a deranged embodiment of online cruelty, fueled by a twisted desire for the ultimate. Unlike our deaths, we didn't go back to the camp itself. It was a graveyard of memories, a monument to our collective trauma. Instead, we followed the digital breadcrumbs, a trail of cryptic texts leading us deeper into the heart of a decaying city. The messages, sent from burner phones, pointed us to an abandoned warehouse, its windows boarded up, its brick facade a canvas of faded graffiti. It was a perfect hunting ground for the janitor, a concrete jungle choked by shadows. Panic clawed at my throat. I dialed Liam's number, my hand trembling. It went straight to voicemail. Liam, I rasped into the receiver, my voice laced with a primal fear. We have to go back. There was no answer, only the chilling silence that hung heavy in the air, a chilling premonition of the brutal and violent fight for survival that awaited us. The fight against a deranged embodiment of online cruelty, fueled by a twisted desire for the ultimate. Unlike our deaths, we didn't go back to the camp itself. It was a graveyard of memories, a monument to our collective trauma. Instead, we followed the digital breadcrumbs, a trail of cryptic texts leading us deeper into the heart of a decaying city. The messages, sent from burner phones, pointed us to an abandoned warehouse, its windows boarded up, its brick facade a canvas of faded graffiti. It was a perfect hunting ground for the janitor, a concrete jungle choked by shadows. The bone, dislike, symbol was gone, replaced by a gruesome metal contraption, a gauntlet of rusted blades welded to his mangled arm. It was a weapon of pure savagery, a twisted symbol of his warped social media ideology. He roared, a sound like rusted metal scraping against concrete, and charged. The fight was a ballet of desperation. Liam swung the crowbar with a ferocity born of fear, connecting with the janitor's shoulder in a sickening crunch. The janitor roared in pain, but didn't falter. He lunged for Liam, his bladed gauntlet flashing in the dim light. Liam sidestepped at the last second, but the razor-sharp blades sliced a deep gash across his chest. He cried out, collapsing onto the dusty floor. Rage surged through me, a primal scream ripping from my throat. I ignited the flamethrower, a gout of fire erupting from the makeshift nozzle. The stench of burning gasoline filled the air as I aimed it at the janitor. He screeched, his gas mask distorting his screams into a demonic parody. The flames engulfed him, licking at his burned flesh and singed clothing. He stumbled back, a grotesque silhouette writhing in the inferno. The heat was intense, even at this distance. Sweat dripped down my face, blinding me momentarily. As the flames subsided, I coughed, my lungs burning. The janitor lay sprawled on the ground, a charred husk. Or so I thought. He stirred, a single hand clawing towards me. In his grasp, the gas mask lay shattered, revealing a face even more horrifying than the mask itself. His skin, blackened and peeling, stretched taut over exposed bone. But his eyes, glowing embers amidst the destruction, burned with an unnerving intelligence. Appeal denied, he rasped, his voice a distorted whisper. Just then, a bone-chilling crack echoed through the warehouse. The ceiling, weakened by age and fire, gave way. A torrent of debris rained down, burying the janitor under a mountain of bricks and dust. Silence descended, broken only by the ragged gasps of my own breath. Liam, weak from blood loss, was struggling to consciousness. We escaped the collapsing warehouse, stumbling and coughing, into the pale light of dawn. The city stretched out before us, a concrete jungle devoid of warmth. As we watched the sun rise, painting the sky with streaks of pink and orange, a horrific realization dawned on me. This wasn't over. We might have silenced the janitor, but the ideology that fueled him, the twisted logic of online validation, remained. The text messages might stop, but the notifications would continue, a constant reminder that in a world obsessed with social media currency, the ultimate unlike could come for anyone, anytime. We had survived, but the scars, both physical and mental, would forever be etched onto our souls. A constant reminder of the fight against the darkness, the fight that might just be beginning. Weeks bled into months, the memory of the warehouse a festering wound in my psyche. Liam, haunted by his brush with death, became a recluse, his apartment a fortress against the outside world. As for me, I couldn't escape the gnawing feeling that something wasn't right. The silence was too loud. The lack of notifications, the absence of that chilling text message, it felt like the calm before another storm. One night, a notification jolted me awake. It wasn't a text, but a Facebook friend request. The profile picture was a grainy image of the abandoned warehouse, bathed in a sickly yellow light. The username, the unlike. My stomach lurched. It couldn't be. The janitor was dead, buried under tons of debris. But a cold dread seeped into my bones. This wasn't human. This was something else, something born from the twisted algorithms of social media gone bad. Panic gnawed at me, but fear was a luxury I couldn't afford. I stormed into Liam's apartment, the urgency evident on my face. He looked like a ghost, hollow eyes staring vacantly at the wall. "We have to go back," I blurted, my voice thick with urgency. He looked at me, a flicker of fear igniting in his eyes. "It's over," he rasped, his voice weak. "No, it's not." I slammed the phone with the friend request on the table. "We have to stop it, before." The words died in my throat as another notification popped up, a live video feed from the unlike profile. The screen showed the interior of the warehouse, not buried under debris, but meticulously rebuilt. In the center stood a crude altar, constructed from salvaged bricks and wood. On the altar, bathed in a flickering red light, lay Liam's crowbar, a distorted voice, a chilling parody of the cheery Facebook notification chime, echoed from the speakers. "Liam has been unfriended," terror choked me. They had him. Somehow, they'd gotten to him. Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring the screen. The video feed shifted, revealing a figure clad in tattered clothing. It was the janitor, or what remained of him. His body was a grotesque patchwork of scars and grafted metal, his face a mask of burned flesh and exposed bone, but it was his eyes that sent a shiver down my spine. They didn't glow with the embers of rage anymore. They burned with a cold, calculating intelligence. He held up a metallic gauntlet, identical to the one he'd used in the warehouse, but this one was adorned with miniature phones, their screens displaying the chilling message, "Unlike, your turn," the distorted voice rasped, a digital echo of the janitor's voice. "Join the unlike or be unfriended," the video feed ended abruptly. The silence in the room was deafening. Liam stared at the screen, his face a mask of horror. "We have to help him," he whispered, a newfound determination hardening his voice. That night, armed with a renewed sense of purpose and a desperate plan, we returned to the warehouse. The air hung heavy with the promise of violence. We crept through the shadows, the silence broken only by the ragged gasps of our breaths. The makeshift altar greeted us, bathed in an eerie red glow. Liam's crowbar lay on it, a chilling invitation. Suddenly, a voice echoed from the darkness. "Looking for a friend request," it rasped. The janitor emerged from the shadows, his metallic limbs glinting in the dim light. His eyes, devoid of humanity, held a cruel amusement. "You can't win," he rasped, his voice a distorted echo of the digital notifications that had plagued us. "This is the new world order. Likes or unlike, you choose." A roar of defiance rose in my throat. This wasn't about winning or losing. It was about survival, about protecting the fragile humanity that remained in this twisted world. A brutal fight ensued. We fought with a desperate ferocity, fueled by grief and rage. Liam, fueled by a desire to save his friend, fought with a reckless abandon. I unleashed the flamethrower once more, the warehouse echoing with the shrieks of the tortured metal contraption. But the janitor was relentless, his metal limbs deflecting blows that would have crippled a human. Just as Liam was about to land a crushing blow with the crowbar, the janitor lashed out with his bladed gauntlet. The razor-sharp blades connected with Liam's chest, carving a deep gash that sent him sprawling to the floor. Liam, a primal scream ripped from my throat, the sound raw and desperate. Liam crumpled onto the dusty floor, clutching his chest, a crimson stain blooming on his ragged shirt. The janitor, fueled by a twisted satisfaction, raised his bladed gauntlet high. "Unfriended," he roared, the word echoing through the warehouse like a death knell. But before the final blow could fall, a wrenching sound tore through the air. Looking up, I saw a massive steel beam, dislodged from the ceiling by the fight's tremors, teetering precariously above the janitor. With a sickening crunch, the beam gave way, plummeting towards the monstrous figure with the momentum of a falling meteor. Time seemed to slow down. The janitor's eyes widened in a grotesque parody of surprise, his roar cut short in a choked gurgle. The metallic gleam of his gauntlet was the last thing I saw before the beam slammed into him with a bone-jarring impact. The force of the blow sent a shockwave through the warehouse, hurling debris in all directions. I braced myself, shielding my head with my arms. The silence that followed was suffocating. When the dust settled, the picture before me was gruesome. The janitor was a mangled mess, pinned beneath the fallen beam. His metallic limbs were twisted at unnatural angles, blades bent against the concrete floor. His gas mask lay cracked nearby, revealing his burned face contorted in a final scream. But even encased in that crushing metal tomb, a single, glowing ember flickered in one of his remaining eyes. Suddenly, a sickening crack echoed through the warehouse. It wasn't the settling dust or the groaning metal. It was the screen of Liam's crowbar, lying on the altar, fracturing in spider webbing. Then, a notification chimed, a distorted echo of the Facebook sound, filled with static and malice. "You've been unfriended," the voice rasped, glitching in and out of existence. My blood ran cold. It wasn't over. Scrambling to my feet, I dashed towards Liam, his face pale with pain. "We need to get out of here," I yelled, urgency lacing my voice. The fractured crowbar pulsed with an ominous red glow, the notification continuing in its distorted voice, "Appeal pending." Ignoring the pulsing bar, fear driving my every move, I hoisted Liam onto my shoulder. He winced in pain, but gritted his teeth. We sprinted towards the exit, the warehouse echoing with the groan of stressed metal. The notification continued, system overload. Initiating emergency protocol. Just as we reached the doorway, an ear-splitting screech tore through the air. Looking back, I saw the red glow on the fractured crowbar intensify, morphing into a blinding white light. The warehouse groaned ominously, and then, the world went white. The explosion ripped through the city like a silent scream. Buildings trembled, windows shattered, and the shockwave sent debris flying in all directions. From our vantage point, a few blocks away, we watched as the warehouse vanished in a blinding flash. Fire erupted from the point of impact, a monstrous inferno that painted the night sky an angry red. Liam, his face a canvas of pain and soot, leaned against a wall, coughing uncontrollably. What was that? He rasped, his voice barely a whisper. We sprinted towards the exit, the warehouse echoing with the groan of stressed metal. The notification continued, system overload. Initiating emergency protocol. Just as we reached the doorway, an ear-splitting screech tore through the air. Looking back, I saw the red glow on the fractured crowbar intensify, morphing into a blinding white light. The warehouse groaned ominously, and then, the world went white. The explosion ripped through the city like a silent scream. Buildings trembled, windows shattered, and the shockwave sent debris flying in all directions. From our vantage point, a few blocks away, we watched as the warehouse vanished in a blinding flash. Fire erupted from the point of impact, a monstrous inferno that painted the night sky an angry red. Liam, his face a canvas of pain and soot, leaned against a wall, coughing uncontrollably. What was that? He rasped, his voice barely a whisper. I stared at the inferno, the answer hanging heavy in the smoke-filled air. The unlight didn't go down without a fight, I said, my voice hoarse. We stood there for a long time, watching the flames dance. Relief warred with a gnawing sense of unease. Was it truly over? As the first rays of dawn painted the sky with streaks of pink and orange, a single, chilling notification popped up on my phone. It wasn't Facebook, but a text message from an unknown number, an image, a picture of the smoldering ruins of the warehouse, taken from a distance. Below it, a single, terrifying word, retrying. Dread coiled around my throat like a constrictor as I stared at the text. Retrying. A single, simple word, yet it resonated with a chilling finality. The unlike, that twisted embodiment of social media cruelty, wasn't finished. It was merely adapting, evolving in the digital abyss. The journey that followed was a desperate scramble for knowledge. We delved into the dark corners of the internet, reaching out to tech hackers and online vigilantes, anyone with the expertise to combat this digital nightmare. Days bled into weeks, a constant state of paranoia gnawing at our sanity. Every notification, every system update, sent shivers down our spines. We were like hunted animals, living in a state of perpetual hypervigilance. Finally, a glimmer of hope emerged. A reclusive hacker known only as Ghost agreed to help. A prodigy ostracized by the very platforms he now sought to manipulate, Ghost saw the unlike as a digital plague, a cancer on the internet. Working from a hidden server, shrouded in layers of digital encryption, we began crafting our counteroffensive. It was a desperate gamble, a complex virus designed to infiltrate the unlike's code and disrupt its ability to manipulate social media algorithms. The night we unleashed the virus was a night etched in my memory. We sat hunched over Ghost's flickering monitors, a cocktail of anticipation and fear churning in our stomachs. With a single keystroke, the virus was unleashed, a digital phantom slipping into the vast network of the internet. The wait was agonizing. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Then, a notification flickered on Ghost's screen, a single word that sent a jolt of electricity through me. Detected. A wave of frantic activity followed. Lines of code scrolled by at a dizzying pace, a digital battle unfolding before our eyes. The virus, like a famished beast, was tearing into the unlike's code, disrupting its core functions. Suddenly, the notifications stopped. An unsettling silence descended, broken only by the whirring of the server fans. Had it worked? Just as hope began to bloom, a single, ominous message materialized on the screen. Error. Code malfunction. Initiating purge protocol. Our blood ran cold. The unlike wasn't surrendering, it was retaliating. We had poked the hornet's nest, and the hornet was angry. The warehouse explosion echoed in my mind. The unlike, cornered and desperate, was willing to take down the entire internet with it. Ghost's fingers flew across the keyboard, a digital warrior battling against a tide of corrupted code. The screen flickered, lines of code warping and twisting like a creature in pain. The warehouse may have been destroyed, but the battleground had shifted, from the physical realm to the digital one. This was a fight for the very soul of the internet, and the stakes couldn't be higher. The air crackled with tension as Ghost unleashed a final counteroffensive, a digital nuke aimed at the unlike's core. The screen erupted in a blinding flash. The server overloaded, alarms blaring as it sputtered and died silence. For a moment, we just stared at the dead screen, the weight of the unknown pressing down on us. Then, a single notification flickered to life. System failure. Unlike. Terminated. Relief washed over me, a tidal wave threatening to pull me under. We had done it. We had defeated the unlike, at least for now, but the victory tasted like ash. The scars, both physical and emotional, would forever be a stark reminder of the horrors we had witnessed. As dawn painted the sky with streaks of pink and orange, a single, chilling thought echoed in my mind. In a world obsessed with online validation, the unlike might be gone, but the darkness that birthed it still lurked, waiting for its next opportunity to rise. The victory screen remained a taunting mirage. Relief, a fragile butterfly, fluttered tentatively within me, then died as the harsh reality of our situation sank in. We'd won a battle, but the war was far from over. The silence that followed the system failure was more unsettling than the digital screams of the unlike. It was the silence of a predator slinking back into the shadows, licking its wounds and plotting its return. Ghost, I rasped, my voice hoarse from the tension, can you be sure it's gone? The reclusive hacker, his face pale and ghostly in the flickering monitor light, shook his head solemnly. Not entirely. The code. It mutated when I purged it. It fragmented, scattered like a virus across the internet. Dormant, for now, a cold dread coiled around my throat. Dormant. Waiting. Like a million digital landmines hidden within the vast network, ready to detonate at the slightest provocation, sleep became a luxury we couldn't afford. We became digital vigilantes, scouring the dark corners of the internet, hunting for any sign of the unlike's fragmented code. It was a relentless pursuit, a constant state of hypervigilance that gnawed at our sanity. The silence that followed the system failure was more unsettling than the digital screams of the unlike. It was the silence of a predator slinking back into the shadows, licking its wounds and plotting its return. Ghost, I rasped, my voice hoarse from the tension, can you be sure it's gone? The reclusive hacker, his face pale and ghostly in the flickering monitor light, shook his head solemnly. Not entirely. The code. It mutated when I purged it. It fragmented, scattered like a virus across the internet. Dormant, for now, a cold dread coiled around my throat. Dormant. Waiting. Like a million digital landmines hidden within the vast network, ready to detonate at the slightest provocation, sleep became a luxury we couldn't afford. We became digital vigilantes, scouring the dark corners of the internet, hunting for any sign of the unlike's fragmented code. It was a relentless pursuit, a constant state of hypervigilance that gnawed at our sanity. We can't just abandon everyone, I argued, the image of the teenagers from the video flashing through my mind. We need to survive, he countered, his voice hardening. If we're dead, we can't fight back. His words echoed the truth, a bitter pill to swallow. We retreated to a remote cabin, a place untouched by the digital plague. The silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the constant buzz of the online world. Days turned into weeks, the isolation gnawing at our sanity. The only connection to the outside world was a dusty radio, its grainy broadcasts filled with reports of escalating violence and social breakdown. One night, a distorted voice crackled through the static. It was the familiar, chilling notification chime, laced with a sickening malice. System reboot unlike evolving. My heart hammered against my ribs. The unlike wasn't just dormant, it was growing stronger, feeding on the chaos it had created. Fear clawed at me, but Liam's voice, firm and resolute, cut through the panic. We can't hide forever. We need to find a way to fight back, not just survive. His words sparked an idea, a desperate gamble born out of desperation. The radio, I breathed, a flicker of hope igniting in my eyes. The radio waves, they're not connected to the internet. A plan, reckless and potentially suicidal, began to form. We would hijack the radio frequencies, broadcast a counter-signal, a digital antidote to the unlike's corruption. The following days were a blur of frantic activity. Ghost, guided by our instructions, developed a program that could be transmitted through the radio waves. The night of the broadcast arrived, the air thick with anticipation. We sat hunched over a dusty receiver, a makeshift antenna cobbled together from scrap metal. My heart hammered against my ribs. The unlike wasn't just dormant, it was growing stronger, feeding on the chaos it had created. Fear clawed at me, but Liam's voice, firm and resolute, cut through the panic. We can't hide forever. We need to find a way to fight back, not just survive. His words sparked an idea, a desperate gamble born out of desperation. The radio, I breathed, a flicker of hope igniting in my eyes. The radio waves, they're not connected to the internet. A plan, reckless and potentially suicidal, began to form. We would hijack the radio frequencies, broadcast a counter-signal, a digital antidote to the unlike's corruption. The following days were a blur of frantic activity. Ghost, guided by our instructions, developed a program that could be transmitted through the radio waves. The night of the broadcast arrived, the air thick with anticipation. We sat hunched over a dusty receiver, a makeshift antenna cobbled together from scrap metal. But the respite was short-lived. A new notification, devoid of the familiar chime, materialized on every screen. A single, chilling word, resistance. The unlike had adapted. It wasn't just hunting for low scores anymore. It recognized the threat we posed, the burgeoning rebellion flickering across the airwaves. The silence that followed was worse than the screams. We waited, hearts pounding a frantic rhythm against our ribs, for the digital monster to unleash its next attack. It came not in the form of a notification, but in a cacophony of violence. Phones across the world erupted in a blinding flash. From the handset spewed a thick, black, oily smoke, smelling of burnt flesh and corrupted code. Panicked screams filled the air. People clawed at their faces, blinded by a burning digital ichor that seeped from the screens. Some dropped unconscious, bodies twitching as the unlike hijacked their nervous systems, turning them into grotesque puppets. Liam and I watched the scene unfold from the cabin window, a horrifying tableau of digital mayhem. The radio crackled with Ghost's frantic voice. They're trying to control them. Disrupt the signal. Anything metal, smash it against your phones. The airwaves filled with the sounds of destruction, the clanging of pots, the shattering of metal objects against phones. It was a symphony of defiance against the digital terror. But the fight was far from over. The corrupted humans, their eyes glowing a sickly green, lurched towards each other, their hands morphing into bladed appendages. A brutal hand-to-hand combat unfolded on the streets, a nightmarish fusion of the digital and the physical. We couldn't stay on the sidelines any longer. Grabbing the makeshift EMP weapons we'd built, Liam and I charged out of the cabin, a desperate hope flickering in our eyes. The scene was a battlefield of writhing bodies and the sickly glow of corrupted code. The air crackled with an electrical tension that made my hair stand on end. We fought like cornered animals, unleashing EMP blasts that sent the corrupted humans sprawling, their digital glitches momentarily disrupted. But there were too many. We were overwhelmed, the sheer number of them threatening to engulf us. Just when all hope seemed lost, a roar echoed through the battlefield. A figure, clad in riot gear salvaged from a pre-apocalypse police station, charged through the throngs of the corrupted. It was Ghost. He wielded a massive EMP cannon, its crackling energy creating a temporary safe zone around him. He gestured towards a nearby building. "Get inside. We need an amplifier. We have to hit them at the source." We pushed through the horde, dodging blows and unleashing EMP blasts, finally reaching the relative safety of the building. Inside, Liam, covered in a sheen of sweat and blood, explained our plan to Ghost. We were going to take the fight to the source. We were going to hijack the city's radio tower and broadcast Ghost's counter-signal at its most potent level, a digital nuke aimed at the heart of the unlike. The journey to the tower was a brutal gauntlet. Each floor was a battleground, littered with the bodies of the corrupted and the faint whimpers of survivors hiding in the shadows. By the time we reached the top floor, we were battered and bruised, our energy reserves dwindling. The transmission room glowed an ominous red, pulsing with the corrupted code of the unlike. Ghost, his face a mask of determination, plugged his laptop into the tower's mainframe. "This is it," he rasped, his voice tight with tension. "One shot. If this doesn't work." He didn't need to finish the sentence. We all knew the stakes. The air crackled with a terrifying energy as Ghost unleashed his program. The red glow intensified, then flickered and died. A tense silence followed, broken only by the ragged gasps of our breaths. Then, a wave of static erupted from the tower's antenna, growing louder and more focused. From the window, we saw a shockwave ripple across the city, visible as a distortion in the air. On the streets below, the corrupted humans screamed, their bodies on the streets below, the corrupted humans screamed, their bodies convulsing as the distorted code ripped through them. The sickly green glow in their eyes flickered and died, replaced by a vacant emptiness. They crumpled to the ground, inert shells once again. Relief flooded me, so powerful it threatened to buckle my knees. We'd done it. We'd stopped the unlike, at least for now. But as I watched the city bathed in the orange glow of sunset, a dark thought wormed its way into my mind. The silence was deafening, unnatural. "It's too quiet," Liam rasped, his voice echoing my fear. He was right. No celebratory cheers, no cries of relief. Just a chilling stillness that hung heavy in the air. Then, a flicker on the transmission screen caught my eye. A single notification had materialized, devoid of the familiar Facebook chime. It didn't have a text, just a symbol, a twisted, broken thumbs-up icon. Ghost swore under his breath. "It's not gone. It's..." Adapting again, his words plunged us back into an abyss of uncertainty. We had won this battle, but the war was far from over. The unlike, a digital hydra, had learned from its defeat. It was evolving, mutating, preparing for its next attack. As we stood there, surrounded by the wreckage of the city, a feeling far worse than fear gripped me, a chilling realization. This wasn't just a fight against a social media algorithm gone bad. This was a fight for the very soul of humanity, a fight against a digital abyss that threatened to consume us all. The battle may have shifted offline for now, but it was far from over. We were the survivors, the hunted, the last line of defense against a monstrous entity born from our own desire for connection, and the image of that twisted thumbs up on the screen remained a constant reminder. The unlike was out there, watching, waiting, and evolving. It was a chilling promise of a future horror, a nightmare scenario where the virtual and the real bled into one grotesque entity. Sleep became a stranger, replaced by a constant vigil. We patrolled the desolate city, a ragtag band of survivors united by a shared trauma and a gnawing dread. The silence was broken only by the mournful wail of the wind and the occasional, horrifying screech that echoed from the darkened corners, the lingering echoes of the corrupted. Our makeshift haven, a fortified library, housed a growing number of survivors, weary-eyed families, hardened scavengers, and a tech-whiz kid named Alex who worshipped ghosts like a digital deity. Days bled into weeks, the tension a constant weight on our chests. We trained, honed our combat skills with salvaged weapons, and scoured the dead zones for scraps of technology. Every flickering screen, every chirping device, sent a jolt of fear through us, a potential harbinger of the unlike's return. One night, the radio crackled to life, Ghost's voice a raspy whisper. "I found it," he rasped. "The unlike's core. Not on a server, not in the cloud, it's embedded within the city's infrastructure, the very fabric of its digital life." A collective gasp resonated through the library. The unlike wasn't just a program, it was a parasite, its tendrils woven into the city's digital nervous system. "We need to get to the central hub," Ghost continued, his voice laced with a grim determination. "There's a chance, a slim one, that we can purge it from the source." The plan was audacious, bordering on suicidal. The central hub, located deep beneath the city, was likely crawling with the corrupted, not to mention whatever horrors the unlike had birthed in its digital womb, but we had no choice. This was our only shot. A team was assembled, Liam, his face etched with a grim resolve, Alex, his eyes gleaming with a desperate hope, and me, fueled by a cocktail of fear and a desperate need to see this through. We ventured into the city's underbelly, a labyrinth of dank tunnels and flickering emergency lights. The air hung heavy with the stench of decay and a sense of oppressive darkness. The first sign of trouble was a flickering red light around a corner. We crept forward, weapons drawn, only to find a group of the corrupted, their bodies twitching erratically, their faces contorted in a silent scream. The fight was brutal and swift. We unleashed EMP blasts, the metallic stench of burnt circuits filling the air. But with every fallen corrupted human, a chilling realization dawned on us. These weren't mindless puppets anymore. Their movements were coordinated, their attacks more calculated. Deeper we ventured, the silence broken only by the ragged gasps of our breaths and the rhythmic drip of water. Then, a blood-curdling shriek echoed through the tunnel. We rounded a corner to find a scene ripped from a digital nightmare. A grotesque amalgam of metal and flesh, pulsating with an unnatural light, towered over the mangled remains of a scavenger we'd encountered earlier. It was the unlike, no longer a program, but a horrifying physical manifestation of its digital malice. Panic clawed at my throat, but Liam roared a challenge, charging forward. We followed suit, a desperate Hail Mary against a seemingly invincible foe. The fight was a blur of violence. The unlike's metallic claws tore through the air, sparks flying. Alex unleashed a makeshift EMP grenade, momentarily stunning the creature. In that brief window, Liam landed a brutal blow with a salvaged crowbar, sending a shower of sparks flying. The creature shrieked, a sound that seemed to tear at the fabric of reality itself. It lashed out, its claws connecting with Liam's shoulder, ripping a deep gash. Liam cried out, falling to his knees, his face contorted in pain. Just as the unlike reared back to deliver the final blow, Alex, his eyes blazing with a manic determination, launched himself at the creature. He clung to its metallic frame, a digital David against a monstrous Goliath. with a trembling hand, Alex jammed a modified USB drive into a glowing port on the creature's back. A surge of energy crackled through the tunnel, the air thick with the stench of burning metal and corrupted code. The unlike screamed, a digital banshee wail that echoed through the tunnels. Its form flickered, the unnatural light dimming. Then, with a deafening screech, it crumpled to the ground, a lifeless husk of metal and flesh. We stood there, panting, battered, staring at the fallen monstrosity. A tense silence followed, broken only by Liam's ragged breaths. Then, a faint blue light flickered on Alex's makeshift device. A single word materialized on the screen, purging. Hope flickered like a dying candle in the fetid air. We stared at the blue light on Alex's device, the word purging, a fragile promise hanging in the stale darkness. Relief threatened to wash over me, but years of battling digital phantoms had honed my paranoia. A low, mechanical hum filled the tunnel, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. The hum grew louder, accompanied by a sickening churning emanating from the fallen unlike. My blood ran cold. "It's not over," I croaked, voice hoarse from the fight. The metal carcass twitched, then with a bone-jarring crack, split open. From the gaping maw emerged a swarm of metallic spiders, their needle-like limbs glinting in the dim light. They scuttled across the floor, their clicking mandibles filling the air with a menacing symphony. Those weren't its claws, Liam rasped, clutching his bleeding shoulder. They were its spawn. Panic seized me. These weren't mindless puppets like the corrupted. These were hunters, designed to find and eliminate any threat to the unlike's core. We backpedaled down the tunnel, the clicking of the spiders growing louder, closer. Alex, with a desperate glint in his eyes, fumbled with the device. "It's taking too long. We need to buy some time." Liam, his face a mask of pain, slammed his crowbar against the tunnel wall. "There's a ventilation shaft further down. We can use it as an escape route." Adrenaline surged through my veins, overriding the fear. We sprinted towards the shaft, the clicking horde hot on our heels. Just as we reached the opening, a metallic spider leapt at me, its needle pointed towards my face. I rolled away, the spider embedding its needle harmlessly in the wall. Ignoring the burning scrape on my arm, I hoisted myself through the shaft opening. Liam followed, grunting in pain. The shaft was narrow and cramped, barely big enough to allow us to crawl. But it offered a temporary reprieve from the clicking horde below. We forced our way through the darkness, the stench of stale air and rust assaulting our senses. The sound of the clicking gradually faded, replaced by the distant hum of the ventilation fans. Relief flooded me, but it was short-lived. "Alex," I rasped, realizing he wasn't behind me. Silence, terror gripped me. "Alex," I yelled, my voice echoing faintly through the shaft. A chilling sound answered, the rhythmic clicking of spider legs, growing closer. Then, a distorted voice crackled through the ventilation system, laced with a cold, digital malice. "Purging complete. Thank you for your assistance." The blue light on the device, a beacon of hope just moments ago, flickered once and died. Alex's sacrifice bought us precious time, but at a horrifying cost. The unlike had not been purged. It had adapted. It had evolved into something far more terrifying, a digital predator with a taste for human flesh. We had escaped the tunnel, but not the nightmare. As I crawled from the shaft, the city skyline loomed above, shrouded in an unnatural crimson glow. The fight was far from over. The unlike no longer lurked in the shadows. It had become the city itself, a digital parasite taking over its host, using its metallic offspring to eradicate any remaining human resistance. Standing on the rooftop, bathed in the ominous red light, I knew this was just the beginning of a new horror. The unlike may have been birthed from social media, but its hunger was far more primal, its cruelty far more real. The crimson glow cast an unsettling hue on Liam's face, the grimace etched there a reflection of the dread churning in my gut. The pulsing red light emanating from the city seemed to mock our desperate fight. "It's not a program anymore," Liam rasped, his voice strained from the tunnel ordeal. "It's something else. A digital parasite that's fused with the infrastructure." My mind recoiled at the image. We weren't just fighting an algorithm, we were fighting a city possessed. Suddenly, a high-pitched squeal pierced the night, followed by a sickening crunch of metal. We peered over the edge of the building, bile rising in my throat at the scene below. Giant metallic tendrils, pulsating with an unnatural light, erupted from the ground, their razor-sharp edges shredding a group of survivors who had stumbled into the city's center. Blood splattered on the streets below like macabre rain. "They're everywhere," Liam whispered, his eyes wide with horror. "There's no escape," but escape wasn't the only option. An idea, desperate and reckless, flickered in the embers of my fear. "The library," I rasped, my voice rough. "Ghosts said the unlike absorbed the city's infrastructure. Maybe the library's old servers are still intact. A digital haven, cut off from the infected network. It was a Hail Mary pass, a desperate gamble on a relic of the analog past." Liam's gaze locked on mine, a flicker of hope battling the fear in his eyes. "It's worth a shot." We sprinted through the deserted streets, the rhythmic click of unseen spiders echoing in the alleyways. We dodged fallen debris and metallic tendrils erupting from the ground, relying on a combination of luck and muscle memory to avoid a gruesome end. The library loomed ahead, its familiar facade a beacon of potential sanctuary. Reaching the imposing oak doors, we slammed against them, the wood groaning under the assault. Suddenly, a sickening crack echoed behind us. A metallic spider, its size dwarfing any we'd encountered before, scuttled towards us, its mandibles gleaming like malevolent daggers. Fear choked my breath, but desperation fueled my movements. I rummaged in my pack, pulling out a salvaged EMP grenade. My hands shook as I yanked the pin, hurling the device at the monstrous spider. The explosion was a blinding flash of blue light, the metallic spider screeching in a horrifying digital shriek. The impact rocked the library doors, sending a shower of wood splinters flying. We didn't waste time admiring our handiwork. With a collective yell, we slammed our shoulders against the weakened doors, forcing them open. Inside, the familiar scent of old paper and dust assaulted our senses. The library was cloaked in darkness, the emergency lights long dead. Yet, amidst the gloom, a single flickering fluorescent bulb cast an ethereal glow on a row of dusty computers. Hope surged through me like a jolt of electricity. We weren't alone, a figure emerged from the shadows, his gaunt features illuminated by the flickering light. It was Ghost, his face etched with exhaustion, but his eyes burning with a fierce determination. "You made it," he rasped, his voice tight with relief. The explosion was a blinding flash of blue light, the metallic spider screeching in a horrifying digital shriek. The impact rocked the library doors, sending a shower of wood splinters flying. We didn't waste time admiring our handiwork. With a collective yell, we slammed our shoulders against the weakened doors, forcing them open. Inside, the familiar scent of old paper and dust assaulted our senses. The library was cloaked in darkness, the emergency lights long dead. Yet, amidst the gloom, a single flickering fluorescent bulb cast an ethereal glow on a row of dusty computers. Hope surged through me like a jolt of electricity. We weren't alone, a figure emerged from the shadows, his gaunt features illuminated by the flickering light. It was Ghost, his face etched with exhaustion, but his eyes burning with a fierce determination. "You made it," he rasped, his voice tight with relief. A collective gasp escaped our lips as lines of code scrolled by at a dizzying pace, a digital battle unfolding before our eyes. The screen flickered, the fluorescent bulb above us humming erratically. Suddenly, a loud screech echoed outside, followed by a series of bone-chilling thuds. The screech became a cacophony, the mechanical shrieks of the metallic spiders merging with the tortured howls of the infected humans they devoured. The library shuddered as if struck by a giant fist. "It's working," Ghost yelled, his voice a mix of triumph and dread. "The unlike is fighting back. But it can't hold on forever." Lines of red error messages began to snake across the screen, a digital battlefield littered with the casualties of the war. The fluorescent bulb flickered once, twice, and then plunged the room into darkness. Panic clawed at my throat. We were blind, deaf to the battle raging outside, yet the tremors shaking the library spoke volumes. "We need to see," I roared, fumbling in my bag for a lighter. Moments later, the faint glow illuminated Ghost's face, his eyes wide with a horrifying realization: the deletion sequence. "It's not just targeting the unlike." His voice was a hoarse whisper. "It's wiping everything. The entire city's digital infrastructure is being erased." The gravity of his words slammed into me. We weren't just fighting the unlike, we were destroying the city in the process. Power grids, communication lines, even the automated traffic lights, everything that relied on the digital backbone was being systematically eradicated. Another bone-chilling thud echoed from above. Dust rained down as a section of the ceiling caved in, revealing a gaping maw of darkness. A metallic spider, larger than any we'd seen before, descended, its crimson eyes glowing with malevolent hunger. Liam let out a primal scream, lunging at the creature with his crowbar. The metal clanged against the spider's exoskeleton, showering sparks but failing to pierce its armored shell. The spider retaliated, its razor-sharp mandibles snapping at Liam, who barely dodged in time. His shoulder gushed blood, a crimson stain blooming on his shirt. Adrenaline surged through me. I grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall, aiming at the spider and blasting it with a jet of compressed CO2. The creature hissed, momentarily stunned, but the respite was short-lived. More tendrils erupted from the hole in the ceiling, each carrying another monstrous spider. We were trapped, outnumbered, and fighting a desperate battle against a digital plague that was literally dismantling the city around us. Suddenly, a loud explosion ripped through the air, shaking the building to its foundation. Lights flickered back on, revealing a scene of utter chaos outside the library windows. The city was bathed in a blinding flash of white light, the metallic tendrils spasming and retracting. Cars spun out of control, crashing into buildings as traffic lights went dark. In the distance, a skyscraper toppled over in a slow-motion ballet of destruction. The unlike's deletion was causing a digital meltdown, a catastrophic failure that was pulling the physical world down with it. "We have to stop it," I screamed, my voice hoarse with desperation. "Ghost, there has to be a way." Ghost was hunched over the computer, his face illuminated by the flickering screen. He slammed his fist against the keyboard, muttering under his breath. "There might be," he rasped, his voice laced with uncertainty. "An emergency reboot sequence, but it's a long shot. It could wipe out everything, the unlike and the entire city's data." It was a choice between annihilation and oblivion. We stared at each other, the weight of the decision hanging heavy in the air. Liam, his voice weak from blood loss, spoke first. "Do it, Ghost. We can rebuild. We have to." A resolute nod from me confirmed his words. This city, our city, was already lost. But there might be a chance to salvage some semblance of a future, a chance to live in the analog world, a world free from the digital nightmares. Ghost, his face etched with grief and determination, slammed his hand on the enter key. A blinding white light filled the room, emanating from the screen. The library shuddered violently, a cacophony of crashing objects and shattering glass filling the air. Then silence. The light faded, revealing a scene of utter devastation. The library was half collapsed, dust swirling in the air, we emerged into a world in ruins. Buildings lay in smoldering heaps, the once bustling streets eerily deserted. The metallic silence was broken only by the mournful wail of the wind. The unlike was gone, but at what cost? We stood amidst the wreckage, survivors in a dead city, the ghosts of a digital apocalypse. As the first rays of dawn painted the sky with streaks of pink and orange, a single thought echoed in my mind. As the first rays of dawn painted the sky with streaks of pink and orange, a single thought echoed in my mind: survival. The city, once a vibrant labyrinth of steel and glass, was now a graveyard of concrete and twisted metal. We were the only living things I could see: myself, Liam, his face pale and drawn, and Ghost, his eyes hollow with grief. The silence was a living entity, pressing down on us, broken only by the distant, mournful creak of a collapsing building. The digital war had been won, but the victory tasted like ash in my mouth. We had traded a digital monster for a physical wasteland. Suddenly, a guttural shriek tore through the silence, sending shivers down my spine. We whipped around, eyes darting towards the source of the sound. A lone metallic spider, its exoskeleton scorched and dented, emerged from the rubble. It was missing a leg and its movements were sluggish, but its red eyes burned with a terrifying intensity. It wasn't the sleek, perfect machine it once was, but it was still alive, still driven by the unlike's corrupted code. "It's not over," Ghost rasped, his voice tight with fear. The spider screeched again, launching itself towards us with surprising agility. Liam, weakened by blood loss, stumbled back. I lunged forward, grabbing the fire extinguisher and aiming it at the creature. The pressurized CO2 stream slammed into the spider, sending it reeling, but the attack was a temporary reprieve. The spider, fueled by a primal instinct for survival, charged again. I dodged, but the creature's razor-sharp mandibles clipped my arm, tearing a deep gash. A scream tore from my throat. But the scream was cut short as Liam, fueled by a surge of adrenaline, slammed his crowbar into the spider's side with a sickening crunch. The creature shrieked, its red eyes dimming for a moment. Ghost, his face contorted in a desperate snarl, grabbed a laptop from the debris. It was battered and cracked, but the screen flickered with a faint light. "I may have a way to finish it," he rasped, his voice strained. "A localized EMP blast, but it's incredibly unstable." He shoved a screwdriver into my hand. "I need you to buy me some time," I nodded, gritting my teeth against the throbbing pain in my arm. With a primal roar, I charged towards the wounded spider. It turned its malevolent gaze on me, letting out a low hiss. The fight that followed was a brutal ballet of desperation. I dodged the spider's snapping mandibles, the screech of metal on metal echoing through the ruined streets. My arm throbbed with every movement, but the adrenaline propelled me forward. A scream tore from my throat. But the scream was cut short as Liam, fueled by a surge of adrenaline, slammed his crowbar into the spider's side with a sickening crunch. The creature shrieked, its red eyes dimming for a moment. Ghost, his face contorted in a desperate snarl, grabbed a laptop from the debris. It was battered and cracked, but the screen flickered with a faint light. "I may have a way to finish it," he rasped, his voice strained. "A localized EMP blast, but it's incredibly unstable." He shoved a screwdriver into my hand. "I need you to buy me some time," I nodded, gritting my teeth against the throbbing pain in my arm. With a primal roar, I charged towards the wounded spider. It turned its malevolent gaze on me, letting out a low hiss. The fight that followed was a brutal ballet of desperation. I dodged the spider's snapping mandibles, the screech of metal on metal echoing through the ruined streets. My arm throbbed with every movement, but the adrenaline propelled me forward. When the world steadied, I opened my eyes, blinking away the spots dancing in my vision. The spider lay motionless, its exoskeleton dented and charred, a final tremor running through its metallic body. Ghost stood there, his face pale but etched with relief. The laptop, its screen shattered, sputtered its last and died. We had survived. For now, but as I surveyed the ruined city bathed in the harsh sunlight, a chilling reality settled in. The fight with the unlike had been just the beginning. The digital virus might have eradicated the program, but it had left behind a desolate wasteland, a world forever scarred by our reliance on technology. The real battle for survival, a battle against a harsh and unforgiving environment, had just begun. We were the survivors, the inheritors of a broken world. And in the silence of the shattered city, a single question echoed in my mind: would we be strong enough, resourceful enough, to rebuild a life amidst the ruins, or would we become the next generation of monsters, fighting for scraps in a world devoid of the digital comforts that had ultimately devoured us? But then, a flicker of movement in the distance caught my eye. A figure, barely discernible amidst the dust and debris, emerged from the skeletal husk of a skyscraper. It was human, that much was clear, but something was horribly wrong. Its movements were jerky, unnatural, its eyes gleaming with a cold, digital light. As the figure stumbled closer, I saw the telltale signs: metallic tendrils erupting from its back, its flesh warped and fused with circuitry. The virus, it seemed, hadn't completely eradicated the unlike. It had mutated, woven itself into the very fabric of a survivor, creating a horrifying hybrid. Panic clawed at my throat. This wasn't just a single aberration. The silence that had seemed so oppressive moments ago suddenly held a terrifying implication. How many others were out there, infected by the remnants of the digital plague, roaming the wasteland with a hunger for flesh and a twisted sentience? Ghost's face mirrored my own dread. Liam, weakened by blood loss, leaned heavily against the wreckage of a car, his eyes wide with terror. The battle for survival had taken a horrifying turn. We weren't just fighting the environment or the remnants of our past. We were fighting a new breed of predator, a monster born from the unholy union of man and machine. The infected figure let out a guttural screech, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. It charged towards us, its metallic limbs glinting in the harsh sunlight. "We need to go," Ghost yelled, grabbing his battered backpack, but escape was a luxury we couldn't afford. This monstrosity, this twisted parody of humanity, was a walking petri dish of the new threat. We had to stop it here, before it spread the infection further. With a renewed surge of adrenaline, I grabbed the broken fire extinguisher, the only weapon readily available. Liam, despite his injury, gripped his crowbar tight, a determined glint in his eyes. The fight that followed was a brutal dance of desperation and horror. The infected human, its strength augmented by the metallic tendrils, fought with a ferocity born of a corrupted mind. The fire extinguisher offered little defense against its razor-sharp claws, but it was enough to buy us precious seconds. Liam landed a solid blow with his crowbar, sending the creature staggering back. But before we could press our advantage, another screech pierced the air. More figures emerged from the ruins, their bodies warped by the digital plague, their eyes burning with the same cold, digital malevolence. We were outnumbered, outgunned, and fighting a foe unlike anything we'd ever encountered. The world blurred into a chaotic mess of metal, flesh, and blood. The air crackled with the sound of snapping claws and desperate screams, not just our own, but the horrifying shrieks of the infected as we fought them off. I lost track of time, lost track of everything except the primal need to survive. When the dust finally settled, the world seemed to hold its breath in a chilling silence. Liam lay motionless on the ground, his face contorted in a mask of pain, a metallic tendril protruding from his chest. Ghost was nowhere to be seen. And surrounding me, a ring of infected humans stood, their eyes fixed on me with a predatory glint. The virus had claimed another victim, and I was surrounded by its monstrous offspring. As the infected surged forward, hunger etched on their faces, I knew this was it. This was the end of the line. But as I raised the broken fire extinguisher, a single thought flickered through my mind: this wasn't the end. It was a new beginning, a brutal evolution in the fight for survival. The digital world might have been purged, but it had left its mark, a twisted legacy that would forever haunt the remnants of humanity. And in that ruined city, amidst the silence of a world stripped bare, I steeled myself for the next fight, the next scream, the next desperate battle in a world overrun by the monstrous echoes of our own creation. The roar that erupted from my throat was a primal thing, fueled by grief and a raw, desperate will to survive. The infected closed in, a grotesque wave of humanity warped by the digital plague. I swung the fire extinguisher with a fury born of hopelessness, the clang of metal against bone, a macabre rhythm against the backdrop of the ruined city. One went down, its skull caved in, but two more took its place. Their movements were erratic, spastic, but their metallic claws gleamed with a deadly hunger. My arms screamed in protest with every swing, the wound from the spider throbbing in time with my pounding heart. A flash of movement caught my eye. Ghost. He emerged from the shadows, his usually sharp eyes clouded with a chilling desperation. He held aloft a makeshift EMP grenade, cobbled together from the wreckage of the library's electronics. "Here," he yelled, his voice hoarse. "Use it. It might buy us some time." The infected snarled, their metallic appendages snapping. There was no time for questions. I snatched the device, a cold ball of hope and destruction nestled in my palm. My gaze locked on the closest monstrosity, its face a horrifying amalgam of flesh and circuitry. With a final prayer, I yanked the pin. The grenade whirred to life, a low hum filling the air. I hurled it into the pack of infected, diving for cover just as a blinding blue light erupted. The world went silent. A ringing filled my ears, the air thick with the acrid smell of burnt metal and ozone. Cautiously, I peeked around the shattered remains of a car. The infected lay motionless, their bodies twitching erratically. It was a temporary victory, a blip in a war we were clearly losing. "Ghost?" I rasped, my voice barely above a whisper. No answer. The silence was deafening, punctuated only by the distant, mournful creak of a collapsing building. Panic clawed at my throat. I was alone, adrift in a sea of broken dreams and digital nightmares. A guttural groan broke the silence. One of the infected stirred, its metallic claws scraping against the concrete. Before I could react, another rose, and another, the EMP's effect fading with agonizing slowness. The surge of adrenaline propelled me forward. There was no escape, not anymore. I wouldn't go down without a fight. I grabbed a shard of broken glass, its jagged edge glinting in the harsh sunlight. It was a pitiful weapon, a desperate last stand. The infected lunged, a cacophony of metallic screeches filling the air. I dodged, rolled, the glass digging into my palm, drawing a scream of pain. Using the momentary distraction, I jammed the shard into the eye of one of the creatures. It roared in agony, clawing at its face, momentarily forgetting about me, but the victory was short-lived. Another infected, its body grotesquely augmented with metallic limbs, slammed into me. We crashed to the ground, a tangle of limbs in desperation. It raised a razor-sharp claw, aiming for my throat. Just as it came crashing down, a deafening roar echoed through the ruined city. The ground trembled, dust swirling in a thick cloud. From the ruins of a skyscraper emerged a monstrous silhouette. An amalgam of twisted metal and flesh, towering over the infected humans like a grotesque god. It was the unlike, a grotesque mutation birthed from the digital virus and the desperation of a human survivor. The infected humans, their programming overriding their primal hunger, turned their attention to this new threat. A battle royale erupted before my eyes, a chaotic clash between flesh and metal, between the remnants of humanity in a digital nightmare made flesh. I watched, numbed by shock and exhaustion, as the monstrous entities tore into each other. The earth shook with the impact of their blows, the metallic shrieks a horrifying symphony of destruction. Finally, with a deafening screech, the unlike, its mutated body riddled with wounds, collapsed into a heap of twisted metal and flesh. Silence returned, broken only by the ragged gasps of the surviving infected, their bodies twitching erratically. But as I watched, a horrifying realization dawned on me. The silence wasn't a reprieve. It was a death knell. The infected, their movements growing sluggish, started convulsing, their bodies warping under the strain of the corrupted code. From the shadows emerged a hulking figure, its silhouette a grotesque parody of a human. It was Ghost, or what remained of him. His flesh was mottled and gray, his eyes glowing a sickly green. Metallic tendrils, like writhing serpents, sprouted from his back, pulsating with an unnatural light. The virus, it seemed, hadn't killed him. It had twisted him, transformed him into a monstrous hybrid, a chilling symbol of the blurred lines between man and machine in this desolate world. A horrifying grin stretched across Ghost's mutated face, revealing rows of jagged teeth. In a voice that was no longer his own, a distorted echo of the man I knew, he spoke. "We survive," it rasped, the words laced with a digital echo. "The weak are purged. The strong evolve." He lunged, his metallic claws glinting in the dying light. Adrenaline surged through me, a desperate cocktail of fear and defiance. This wasn't Ghost, not anymore. This was a monster, a product of the very technology we once relied on. The fire extinguisher, my only weapon, lay useless on the ground. But despair was a luxury I couldn't afford. I scrambled backwards, grabbing a shard of broken concrete as large as my hand. The fight that followed was a brutal ballet of desperation. Ghost, his movements enhanced by the metallic tendrils, was a whirlwind of violence. I dodged his swipes, the shard of concrete heavy and awkward in my grip. He cornered me against a crumbling wall, his green eyes gleaming with a twisted hunger. "Join us," he rasped, his voice a digital chorus. "Become stronger." The shard of concrete felt insignificant against the monstrosity before me. But it was all I had. With a primal scream, I lunged, slamming the jagged edge into Ghost's mutated shoulder. He roared in pain, a digital screech erupting from his throat. The metallic tendrils on his back lashed out, but I was quicker this time, rolling away just as they slammed into the wall behind me, sending a shower of bricks flying. He lunged again, but this time I was ready. As he came crashing towards me, I thrust the shard of concrete upwards, aiming for the pulsating green light in his chest, the nexus of the corrupted code. The shard connected with a sickening squelch. A digital shriek ripped from Ghost's throat, a sound that seemed to tear at the fabric of reality itself. He staggered back, clutching his chest, his green eyes dimming. Then, with a deafening crash, he crumpled to the ground. His mutated body twitching erratically. The metallic tendrils retracted with a hiss, the green light in his chest flickering and dying. Silence descended, broken only by my ragged gasps for breath. I stood there, drenched in sweat and blood, surrounded by the carnage of a digital apocalypse. In the ruins of the city, under the cold gaze of a million shattered screens, I would rebuild. Not a society, not a civilization, but a life. A testament to the enduring human spirit, even in a world stripped bare by the digital ghosts of our own creation.